Leaders for the GYC and leaders at the General Conference caught on video making false, disgusting statements about abortion. When Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022, a new channel was started here titled Some Adventist Women. This is all very public, so the public can respond, where a, quote, lawyer, public health officer, historian, engineer, and theologian produced a video where all sorts of absurd, false, or just disgusting statements were made by these women, especially by these four. On the top left is Siku Lulegile Dako, also known as Siku. She was a vice president for the GYC for many years and is now an editor for the Adventist Review, the flagship journal of the World Adventist Church. And if you open the recent issue here, August 2024, you will see her there as the author of the editorial because she is one of the main editors. So, one of the most influential voices in the entire world church. Next, on the bottom right, is Amy Shepard Ratsara, also former vice president for the GYC. And as you can see on their website, here she's currently a board member for the GYC. The third person here, Michelle Lee, is a history professor at Southern, also a board member for the GYC. And then this person here in the top middle with engineering degrees from MIT and a PhD. So a panel of really smart people, which is really important because these are very intelligent, educated, accomplished people. They're not speaking by accident. These four specifically of this panel made their claims very public and posted their video for the public so that their ideas can be put into the minds of church members. To summarize briefly, Siku Dako claimed without a single shred of evidence that abortion is a religious freedom matter of conscience. But this is a serious problem because the Adventist Church, in our official statement right here, defines the unborn as children and that abortion is a violation of the Sixth Commandment. So, it's very disturbing, to say the least, that the editor for the Review and former GYC vice president would claim that killing children is a religious freedom. She also makes a really weird statement that when there is a bifurcation of the abortion issue, or when it is bifurcated, which means divided into two sides, she says that when this issue is divided into two sides, this is, quote, a lot of times a false narrative when you think about it biblically. The child is going to live or the child is going to die. That's what abortion does. How in the world is that a false narrative? She says that when you think about it biblically. But typical of Adventist leaders, nowhere in this entire discussion do they appeal to the Bible even one time, not even once. And this woman here, Amy Ratsara, former vice president and current board member for the GYC, she made the claim that Adventists are being influenced on abortion by sermons and podcasts and culture of evangelicals, then implied that evangelicals are wrong and that we Adventists instead need to have discernment. Well, what exactly is that discernment? She didn't mention. The most disgusting comments, however, came from this woman, a history professor at Southern, also a board member at the GYC. You notice a pattern here, GYC, GYC, GYC. Her comments sounded like she was repeating the headlines or bullet points from a Planned Parenthood memo. There is a lot that could be said, but arguably the worst part is when she tries to tie medical advances for an anal and vaginal fistula to opposition to abortion. For those who don't know, a vaginal or anal fistula, or in this context called an obstetric fistula, is when there are complications with a pregnancy that result in damage to the bladder or rectum, and this can result in a woman having no control over her urine or feces. For thousands of years, this has been, and even in some areas of the world today, as the WHO says here, a cause of shame, social segregation, and health problems because, think about it, how would you like to be a woman with urine and feces constantly falling out of your body uncontrollably? For thousands of years, there was no known treatment for this until the 19th century when a famous physician, J Marion Sims, living in the USA, developed the tools and surgical techniques to cure this problem. But his great sin, his great transgression, is that he was a white man, and the women who he helped were black. They were black slaves. And in today's environment of fanaticism and hatred of white men, such a great accomplishment has to be canceled and treated with scorn. But notice carefully, pay very close attention. You will not hear the fanatics explain that these women did not want to live their lives with feces and urine constantly falling out of their body, and that they wanted Dr. Sims to develop some answer to provide relief. Remember that at this time in history, there were no advances in medical science and technology like we have today. They did not have all the antiseptics and analgesics and antibiotics and advanced techniques and equipment. There were no anesthetics, nothing like we have today. Uriah Smith, our Adventist pioneer, he had his leg amputated with no anesthetic. All he had was his mother to hold his hand. And this doctor who is living in the South, he is requested multiple times to help these women. And if you read the autobiography and the records that are available, he states repeatedly that he did not want to do so because he doesn't know how to help them, because again, at that time, nobody knew what to do. As published here in the Journal of Medical Ethics, the common experience of surgeons at this time who undertook the care of women with vesicovaginal fistulas was a repeated series of what? Of failures, with the desperate patients returning again and again, what's that word? Starts with a B, begging that another attempt be made to give them some relief. That this, quote, historian at an Adventist university would attack this doctor and his accomplishments without apparently reading any of these sources is outrageous, because the slave women themselves, quote, clamored for his help. Did she mention that? No, of course not. One of the best summaries is not only Dr. Sims' own autobiography, but this article here in the Journal of Medical Ethics, which refutes the falsehoods of the fanatics. This, quote, Adventist historian is trying to create in the mind an emotional sense of revulsion and anger to create, as she says, quote, a racial component that efforts to oppose abortion and the field of gynecology were developed by power-hungry, hateful, bigoted white men, and then in the same breath claim that evangelical opposition to abortion in the 1970s, I can't believe people say this, was based on rhetoric and political agenda, that it is, quote, intertwined with Christian nationalism. Can you hear the dog whistle? And that we Adventists need a, quote, biblical worldview as opposed to the evangelical political religious view. We need to be careful, she says, because Adventists are, quote, co-opting this rhetoric. Notice very carefully that when the abortion industry specifically targets blacks, she has nothing to say. It's the people who oppose the killing, oh, that's the problem. And to prove the point, Dr. Edward Allred, who boasted very publicly of murdering over 250,000 children, and who boasted of specifically targeting black and minority children to be killed, and who boasted of killing over 100 children every seventh-day Sabbath. And this is the man who is openly honored in Adventist institutions as an example forever for our youth. And when our church is blasted in the international media for this disgusting hypocrisy, notice that the GYC has not one word to say. These historians have gone totally silent. You notice that? Allred is the biggest, most in-your-face evidence that much of what you see and much of what you hear is just theater. It's just a show. People aren't actually going to go through with what they preach. She says that we are co-opting the rhetoric of evangelicals. Yes, because they are correct. And it's the exact same rhetoric from our pioneers. Now, as I have done repeatedly in many previous videos, I could easily go through each line and statement and claim and demonstrate with historical evidence that what is coming out of her mouth are distortions and falsehoods, if not outright lies. But what needs to be emphasized in this video is that these poor women, these poor slaves in the 19th century have a horrible physical condition of urine and feces coming out of their body, causing them continual agony and shame. And this woman, this leader in the GYC, takes advantage of their suffering and completely distorts the history so that she can attack people today who oppose abortion. Now, even if we suspend all judgment and throw out all of the evidence and pretend that we have single-digit IQs, even if for a moment we believe that what she's saying is true, what in the world does that have to do with us Adventists today and whether we should support killing children? Don't we have the Bible? And doesn't God's word in both the Old and New Testaments repeatedly define the unborn as children with the exact same Greek and Hebrew words for born children? Doesn't the government have the God-given authority and duty to legislate civil society? These statements by the leaders in the GYC are not only negligent and so unprofessional, they are outrageous and disgusting. This is gross. And what's even worse and really weird is that the GYC didn't bring this problem into the church. The fanatics before us did that, but the leaders of the GYC will bend over and contort themselves in every possible way to try to defend something that is completely indefensible. Notice the irony. The little child who cannot defend his or herself will get no defense, no voice from the GYC. But the church who takes the posture of violence and hostility and murder, that's what the GYC leaders are trying to defend. Now, their video is public, so the public is free to respond. So even though I don't have to do this, I did reach out first to this lawyer here, Mrs. Ratsara, because in another video she said, get this, she said that Adventists have a duty to remind the government of its legitimate authority because when that doesn't happen, people get hurt. In an article dated December 2022 here in the Adventist World magazine, Ratsara affirmed our historic argument that, quote, there are areas of life over which the civil government has jurisdiction, and that the government could make laws regulating things that pertain to a person's relationship between them and their fellow individuals. If the conduct that the government desired to regulate fell within the last 6 commandments, then the legislation was what was appropriate. But if it was within the first 4 commandments, it would be illegitimate. I thought this was really interesting because in the video, she implied that evangelicals are wrong. So I personally contacted Mrs. Ratsara with a very nice, very respectful email, and I pointed out that our Adventist pioneers taught the exact same thing as evangelicals today. I said, quote, when the American Medical Association began its famous efforts to outlaw abortion, our very own Adventist pioneers openly praised these efforts, stating that, quote, the medical profession have taken a noble stand and society owes a debt of gratitude to Dr. Horatio Storer of Boston, the director of the AMA's anti-abortion efforts. Advent Review and Herald, June 25th, 1867. Our pioneers were surrounded by a national effort to make abortion illegal in every state of the Union, and they openly praised this work as necessary for society's good. They believed and taught the exact same message of evangelicals today. So after asking her why the evangelicals are wrong, I also asked, do you believe the Adventist pioneers were correct to publicly support anti-abortion legislation? And guess what? Surprise! After sending that email, suddenly, just a few hours ago, the video of them talking about abortion was taken down and made private. It's been public for over 2 years. I send an email and suddenly they want to hide it. What happened? I thought this was the editor for the Adventist Review. I thought these were PhDs and theologians and really smart, intelligent people. These are leaders in the GYC. I thought leaders in the GYC were to be unashamed of their witness for Christ. If this is the truth, if this is what the Bible teaches, why hide it? Why hide it? The problem, though, is that I know how Adventists respond to this issue. They're very predictable. They've done this for 50 years. For over 50 years, our leaders will make all sorts of false and disgusting claims and say things that are not true. And then when they get caught, they will try to delete and hide the evidence. They will try to block you and ignore you. But as I've said before many times, when interacting with them, you have to screenshot and download everything. So I have a copy of the video, which will be addressed probably on a different website. In closing, please help me. In what world do we Christians think that we can support the shedding of innocent blood and get away with this? In what world do we think that we can just keep blocking and attacking people, that this problem will just somehow go away? Do we really hate Jesus so much that we will continually fight against all of the evidence all the way to our own destruction? Why are we Adventists so infatuated with the violent, depraved philosophies of this world? Little children, little boys and girls have their face ripped off, their spine torn out of their back. It is absolutely crazy to realize that some of the strongest supporters for this evil are leaders in the GYC. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more, please see the links below and check out the other videos. I can't handle any more today. Have a nice day.